pinna. We call that the ear pinna. Pinna. That's the ear pinna, and it is made up of a cartilage which is covered by a skin. Are you together? So that is the structure that we have in the outermost ear. Starting is with the ear pinna. So when you are labeling that part, you will label it as just pinna. We know that it is the structure that is part of our outer ear. Followed by that comes the next structure that is called the auditory canal. In layman's term, we can use the term as ear canal, but we are not going to use that term when we are labeling in our examination. It is a must that we need to use. Anything to do with the ear, auditory nerve, auditory canal. So this is a canal which we call as the auditory canal. In other words, we use the term ear canal. So that's one color. You can see it's drawn with the blue color. So that makes the compartment of the outer ear, which consists of only two things, that is our ear pinna and the auditory canal. Now when we look at the auditory canal, when you look into one's ear, you will see small hair-like structures there. What do you think that those hair follicles are for? Just like I talked about the eye, the structure, we had the eyelashes. Its main function there is to prevent any foreign bodies, any foreign objects entering into the middle ear or into the inner ear. So we have those hair-like structures. Then we have a gland there, which is a sebaceous gland, which is responsible for producing something called cerumen. The structure that is there, which is responsible for producing the cerumen, is called auditory canal, and it is produced by the structure called the sebaceous gland. What is cerumen? In layman's term, we can use the word wax. Okay, wax is produced there. It is something that is naturally produced, so that if there is any tiny organism entering, it gets dissolved there. It does not go further into the middle ear and into the innermost ear. Out of the three parts that we have labeled, you should remember always that outer ear and middle ear are air-filled cavities. They are supposed to be only filled with air. And it is the inner ear that is responsible to be filled up with fluid. So we call them a fluid-filled cavity, and these two are air-filled cavities. So you understood the structure of the outer ear, which is very easy. They will not ask you the structure of the outer ear. Most of the time for your examination, they ask you about the middle ear and the inner ear. Are we together? So sometimes you can erase this whole picture. What you will see on the examination paper will be this structure. So the learner has to identify that, okay, this is the structure of the inner ear. This is the structure. It will look like a drumstick, but it is not a drumstick. It is the structure of the middle ear. Now let's go on to the last part here in the structure of the outer ear, which is the beginning of the middle ear and the end of the outer ear. We call that the tympanic membrane. In other words, we call that the eardrum. You say, my eardrum. So that terminology, a scientific term for that is called the tympanic membrane. And it is a very delicate membrane. We have to be very careful. What do you do when you get any foreign body that enters? So you get sometimes itchiness inside. Itchiness means scratching. What do? You take an earbud and start. Or sometimes we take a pencil or a pen, something pointed, and try to scratch on. You cannot go through till the eardrum because the structure is in such a way that it is not straight. Are we together? It is in such a manner, like an S-shaped structure, so that maximum, even if you bring it, unless it is very pointed, like sometimes a compass, you put a divider, you can break up your eardrum. Then you will become permanently deaf. Do you understand? You're creating that problem yourself. So that is not a place for, if you want to clear your ear, it's just the outermost portion with your earbud, innermost portion again of your outer ear, that is maximum. Not to take out all the wax. The wax is there, or the cerumen is there to protect your ear from any further infections. Are we together? So that gives you the parts, the pinna, the auditory canal, and the tympanic membrane. Now let's go to the second part of our ear, which is the middle ear. Middle ear is composed of a bony cavity, and it composed of three bones. Air-filled cavity, there is no water supposed to be there, and we have three irregular bones. They are not properly structured. Are we together? They have different shape. So according to that, we are going to give them names. One is according to the shape, one is according to their names that they have. So I'm going to name, you have named it as hammer, anvil, and stirrup. That's according to the shape. You know what a stirrup is? When you are riding a horse, that thing where you put your leg on is the stirrup, okay? That gives the shape. So one is a hammer-shaped structure, the anvil, and the stirrup according to the shape. It has got also the names. First one, second one, third one. One is called the malleus. The hammer-shaped one is called the malleus. The anvil-shaped is called the incus, and then the stirrup one is called the stapes. Malleus, incus, stapes. Are we together? So we do not know how the examiner is going to ask the question. If it is hammer they gave, what is 2 and 3, you will say it as anvil and stirrup. If it is malleus they gave, you will write it as malleus, incus, and stapes. It is hard for you for the first day, later you will learn those spellings. Very important for us. And if they give you in the examination, what is the name of this part label all together, all the three are together, one mark for it, then you need to know it is ossicles. Ossicles is one word for all the three bones. Remember we learned about the structure of the brain. And then I said we got the dura mater, the pia mater, and in between the arachnoid membrane. All together we said one word. What was that? Meninges. So all the three bones of the middle ear is called dash. They may ask for your examination. One mark. Then you will say ossicles. If they ask you name, list out the three names of the bones in the middle ear. Then according to the sequence, hammer, anvil, stirrup, or malleus, incus, and stapes. Are we together? So for you to understand the whole concept of middle ear, the best thing for you to remember is we're going to write that as Miss has, not me, Miss has, and the last one will be ossicles. Are we together? Miss has ossicles, which means that I've named it according to their names, I've named it according to their shape, I've named it all together as one word. So when you're learning for the exam, you just have to remember that don't use those terminologies. This is just for you to understand. When you're writing for the examination, you just have to have that in your mind so that you will know. Okay, Miss was malleus, M for malleus, what is I for? Incus, S is for stapes. Has. Has means hammer, anvil, and so on. And then we have the one word for that, which is ossicles. Miss has ossicles. You have explained everything about the middle ear. Now there's one more structure that is here with the middle ear, which is connecting the middle ear with your top or with your pharynx. Are we together? You have learned about the pharynx in grade 11. So what is that structure? Which means that pharynx is the area of your back of your throat. So have you ever seen that when you have a middle ear infection, okay, or when you have a problem with your nasal cavity, you get blocked, you put some drops either through your nasal cavity or through your ears, the ear drops, okay? When there is wax getting accumulated, sometimes we put ear drops. Have you felt the taste of the medicine in your mouth? Yes. Why and how? Why do you think? Because there's a connection between your ear, mainly between your middle ear and your pharynx. Middle ear and your throat. So that is that structure that is connecting the middle ear and your pharynx, that is called eustachian tube. Even though the spelling is EU, we will say it as, or we pronounce it as E is silent. You won't say E eustachian tube. When you write in an exam, you can write it in your mind like E eustachian, but the spelling is when you say it, you will just say eustachian tube. Eustachian tube's main function is to equalize pressure on either side of your eardrum. To equalize. Have you traveled in a plane when there was a change in the altitude, or on land by car? When you change the altitude, all of a sudden you experience that your ear gets blocked. Yes or no? And then it is irritating because it can even pop up your eardrum. We need to equalize the pressure. So there are things that we can do at that time. So if you are on a flight, during that takeoff time, you will experience children, you will see children crying. So what they advise, give something to drink. That sucking reflex, okay? You cannot tell a baby to start yawning. That is something that an adult can do. You understand? So others are either swallowing or yawning. When we do that, you will hear that popping sound of easing the pressure. Are we together? That's why I said ear, nose and throat are connected. That's why we go not to an ear specialist, to an ENT specialist, because you can have an infection of your throat that can again go, the bacteria can go all the way from there, cause infection in the middle ear where you get accumulation of fluid in the middle ear. Is that an area which is supposed to be with fluid? No, it is an air-filled cavity. So we don't expect any fluid in that particular area. But whenever infection occurs through the nasal part or through your mouth, an infection occurs, it can go and block up this area, and then there will be a high pressure in the eustachian tube. So when we learn about, first we are learning the anatomy, later we will learn about the disease condition where we will come across middle ear infection, where fluid gets collected. What happens, the scenario they will give you. What happens when your eustachian tube gets blocked or swollen due to an infection? How will you ease the pressure in either side? So they will ask you what will happen to the patient. So if you know what is the function of the eustachian tube, you will write that function will not happen. That means equalizing the pressure on either side of the eardrum will not happen. As a result of that, the eardrum will break and patient will become deaf. That will be your answer. So you apply what you have studied in your answer. It will not be just writing what's the function of the eustachian. Everybody knows it. But a scenario will be given to you, and where you are asked to explain about what will happen. So that's about the eustachian tube. So what all did we learn in the middle ear? We learned about the 4 parts of the middle ear, the 3 bonds, that they are irregular in shape, and we said they are arranged according to their shape and the name. According to the name, we have malleus, incus and stapes. According to their shape, hammer, anvil and sternum. If we want to give one word for that whole 3 bonds together, how do we describe that? As ossicles. And I used an abbreviation which is meant for you and me to remember. Miss has ossicles. How is your middle ear connected with the pharynx? Which is the name of that structure that connects the middle ear? Eustachian tube. What is the function of the eustachian tube? E is for, remember, E, eustachian tube. E is for equalizing. So it's very easy because we had one more thing which is dealing with pressure. So you might get confused. So when you ever see the word eustachian tube, always remember its main function is to equalize the pressure. As we said already that the function of the ear was hearing and balancing. Remember, we are not hearing in this auditory part of it. You understand? It's not happening in this part where we have the middle ear. All those functions mainly happen in the inner ear. That is why it is well and protected. There's a lot of things that we need to understand when we come to the inner ear. That's the main important thing. As we learned in the eye, what were the name of the receptors which were present on the retina? Photoreceptors. What were the 2 photoreceptors? Rods and cones. Here also we are going to learn about 3 receptors. One will be meant for you for hearing. One will be meant for you for balancing. There are 2 in fact. One when the direction of the head changes, one when the speed changes. So there are different receptors that are meant for that. Are we together? We will learn about what is the one which is meant for hearing, which after learning the structure we will go into detail. Now let's label the parts of the inner ear. What are the parts of the inner ear? The inner ear consists of a semicircular canal, okay, which is not a full circle, half of it is there, okay. So and they are positioned in right angles to each other, put it together, and it is filled up with the fluid. I'll come across that. What is the name of the fluid that is filled up in that? We'll learn about it. So this structure, when you're labeling in the inner ear, we call that the semicircular canal. So it's easy for you to, whether you label this one, or this one, or all the three together. That whole structure is called the semicircular canal. Any doubts with the understanding that much? You understood that? Okay. Then comes the next structure, which looks like a snail. You know what a snail looks like? The pattern is like that of a snail, and that structure is called the cochlea. The way you pronounce it is correct. It should be cochlea. Cochlea is connected to a nerve that is called the auditory nerve. What is the nerve that is connecting that with your eye? We said it is optic nerve. The one which is going through your ear is called the auditory nerve. Auditory nerve's main function is to carry the impulses, because when it goes through the nerve, impulses. What is impulses? In other words, we said it is messages. So how does that impulse go? Because I said one is for hearing and one is for balancing. We need to go back to our structure of the brain, where we came across two things. Which are those two C's? One is cerebrum and one was cerebellum. So which was the structure in the brain that was responsible for interpretation of all your sensation in the brain? Cerebrum. Okay? And which was the structure that was responsible for balancing? Balancing was cerebellum. So you need to know that this nerve, actually this nerve that is going through the cochlea out of the ear, of the inner ear, is dividing into two. One is called, do you understand? It's splitting into two. One which is taking the message to the part of the brain called cerebrum, so that I'm able to hear. And one is going to the part of the brain which is called the cerebellum, so that I'm able to balance. When we say this balancing, can we just take some examples when we are in a merry-go-round? You know what a merry-go-round is, a primary dimension. Or if you have been in a fun fair, festival or somewhere, a giant wheel which rotates in a circular motion. Okay? What happens? Have you been in a giant wheel?
Yes.
And how is your experience? You'll be screaming up. By the time it goes faster, you understand? And when you are dropped in your position, it takes time for you to, you'll be shaken. Do you understand? It's because of the movement of the fluid. Why? Which fluid are we talking about? The fluid that is present in the inner ear. It takes time for it to stabilize. So you feel that uneven thing in balancing. So the information has to go back to the part of your brain called the cerebellum. From the cerebellum, it has to go back to your muscles so that you are able to retain your balance, so you don't fall. Sometimes we have heard about middle ear infections, sometimes problems with the ear, where children will be fainting, falling down imbalance because of that. Okay, so that is also because of the problem with the fluid collected there, and it is not properly balanced. You might have to take a medication for a while in order for you to maintain balance. Just like that, the child will be falling down, not your normal falling down process because of imbalance. Are we together? So that's why we said that we have two things happening here with the ear. One is to make you balance, and the other one is to make you hear. Whatever we are talking to you right now, every learner has to hear. Until I told you that day also, if I put a chalk down, that noise has to be heard at the back of the bench. That means that both your ears are able to capture the sound waves towards the outer ear. Trap it, and then all the way it goes to the tympanic membrane. So that gives you the structure. So it's not at one area that the information is going, it is splitting. So you don't have an information saying that, okay, the brain's function is to convert all these sensations of hearing for us to hear. There are two parts that it is splitting the nerve into, one to the cerebrum and one to the cerebellum. If it is time for you to balance, then the information only goes to the cerebellum. It is not going to the cerebellum because that's not the time for you to be hearing. Hearing part happens inside the interpretation. I mean, the interpretation of hearing has to take place in the part of the brain which is called the cerebellum. Cerebellum is for balancing. Is that much clear? Now, again, so this is your nerve. What was the nerve called? Optic. Not optic nerve.
Auditory nerve.
Yeah.